What's up guys, it's me, Jeremy. Team compositions are one of the biggest strategical differences when comparing competitive play to your average everyday gameplay in solo queue. The difference is what makes professional League of Legends so interesting to watch. The thought, the strategy, and execution these teams pull off is just awesome. As we count down the list, we'll be measuring the compositions by how powerful they were at the time and how well they dominated the meta. Really quick, I want to give a shout out to the new channel I'm working on, gamk.vn's community. I'll be making community compilations of some sweet outplays of specific champion mechanics and uploading a new one twice a week, so definitely check it out, and as well you can submit me your clips at gamk.vn@gmail.com. Let's get started. Number 10 is what was known as the Curse of the Sad Bullet Time composition. This comp focused on teamfighting with Amumu, Miss Fortune, and Sona, creating somewhat of a wombo combo to lock down the enemy team for some massive AoE damage. This comp dominated the meta quite heavily at the beginning of Season 3, and eventually led to those 3 champions being nerfed. It rose up right after a bunch of crazy preseason changes, so this comp being simple to play and very powerful to make use of was a really nice bonus since the composition was somewhat difficult to outplay, and took advantage of some really powerful champions until they got nerfed and the comp fell out of the meta. Number 9 is the Yasuo knockup composition. With the release of Yasuo, we were introduced to this crazy overloaded champion that gave a really powerful effect to any knockup by extending the duration of the crowd control effect, as well as pumping out a ton of damage. And after he got buffed and became powerful, the compositions built around Yasuo became one of the most powerful options in the meta, and still is relevant to this day due to the strength of Yasuo as a champion. There's been loads of different variations here and there, but they all focus on knocking up a bunch of people and then using Yasuo's ultimate for a good 3 seconds or so of area of effect, crowd control, and damage. Number 8 is the split push composition. There's been a lot of variations of this comp throughout the years, but the strategy of having a really strong duelist and split pushing either in a 4-1 setup where you split push in one lane, or in a 1-3-1 setup where you split push in the 2 side lanes, has always been a potent strategy that takes advantage of strong duelists and having good wave clear and disengage to fend off the rest of the team. Split pushing is a strategy that works quite well, especially if you are even just a tiny bit ahead, so comps built around it have seen a lot of success and really does a good job of taking advantage and making the most of those powerful duelists that have existed throughout the years, and we've seen a solid amount of champions nerfed because of it. Number 7 is the Orianna teamfight composition. The most popular forms of this have existed using champions like Malphite, Alistar, and especially Rengar. The combo of having someone with an insanely powerful, and more importantly, reliable gap closer, comboed with the Orianna Shockwave is a super strong teamfight composition that has always been at least a little popular since Orianna was realized as a prominent competitive mid laner. Orianna's main weakness in her kit is that the time it takes for her ball to move around is a bit slow, as are her ranges, so having a ball delivery system works really well and leads to some crazy teamfight combos that have had a place in the meta ever since Season 2 really. Number 6 is the Protect the AD Carry comp, the most known version being the Juggernaut composition. This comp builds a support group for a massive hyper carry to scale up into the late game and be able to melt opponents by having an unkillable hyper carry force. It uses support mages such as Lulu and Janna, as well as some more supportive junglers. Overall, this comp tends to lack damage a little bit in the mid game, but the ability to protect the AD carry is just ridiculous and leads to a really powerful late game. It's popped in and out of the meta based on how strong hypercarries are in the current time, but it's always going to be a great option when hypercarries are strong and there's good support mages that can be played. Number 5 I like to call the Cloud9 comp. I wasn't really sure what to call it since it kind of doesn't have a name, but it's the composition of Rumble, Zac, Ashe, and Zyra that Cloud9 was able to bring out of nowhere to completely crush the North American meta. The pick and mid-game power the comp created played to the strengths of their team really well, and it was an awesome composition that brought some unplayed champions like Ashe back into the meta completely when many thought she was totally unplayable, and it really took the meta by storm. They took advantage of the pick potential, crowd control, and heavy power spikes the comp created to dominate dragon fights and pull off a lot of really consistent baits to outplay teams. Number 4 is the hard engage composition. Now this one is a bit loose as there have been a ton of variations of it throughout the years, taking advantage of champion synergies like Gnar and Jarvan, things with Sejuani, stuff like that where you can position to fight and really just run up to your opponents and just go in. This kind of fight potential creates a lot of pressure and punishes mistakes really hard, so the comp works quite well and is a really popular option since it punishes quite a few weaknesses in some other compositions, and over the years has been the playstyle that counters most off-the-wall strategies since it's just so reliable. Number 3 is the Sivir comp, also known as the Stampede comp. This composition is pretty similar to the Hard Engage comp, but uses the power of Sivir ultimate to group up and force fights effectively. It has the same strengths that the Hard Engage comps of creating a lot of pressure and punishing mistakes and weaknesses quite effectively since it's just so reliable, and still super powerful to just group up, Sivir ult, and start a fight. And so when Sivir got buffed, this comp became a huge force for the meta and is honestly a big reason why off the meta strategies have had a hard time seeing success recently, and as we're seeing recently as well, is leading to some Sivir nerfs specifically to her ultimate. Number 2 is the Poke composition. This comp has also had a few variations throughout the years, but it works really well since it creates a strategy of poking out your opponent off of an objective to take it for free, comboed with some nice disengage to prevent the opponents from fighting you. It's a really good strategy since League is such an objective focused game, and a poke comp accomplishes that so well, and when poke mages gained popularity, we really started to see this comp come to fruition. It's quite nice as it creates a reliable chokehold when ahead, but when you're behind, you can still win fights by poking out your opponents beforehand, so it really doesn't get snowballed on that hard at all, and it defends really well. And so overall the comp does lack quite a few weaknesses that some other comps might have, which has allowed it to see quite a bit of play throughout the years. And number 1 is the global composition. This comp took the early and mid-season 2 meta by storm and was completely dominant, and so for a time, the games were decided by whichever team would end up with more global champions on their team, and the comp stayed relevant up until the end of Season 3 or so. Notably, Team Solo Mid popularized the comp in North America, and it focused on using 2 to 3 or more global champions, such as Ashe, Nocturne, Karthus, Shen, and Soraka, comboed with the extremely popular at the time summoner spell, Clairvoyance, to invade your opponent's force plays and heavily pressure the lanes. It wasn't uncommon to see a jungler get clairvoyanced, and the next thing you know they were hit by an Ashe arrow and had a Nocturne and a Shen on top of them. A play like that is monstrous and does a lot to snowball the game, and so the early and mid game playmaking potential and power of these comps, which were revolved off of some reasonably strong late game champions, led to a ridiculously powerful composition that I think is the only comp on my list that ended up with literally every single champion that was used in the comp being nerfed. The globals across all of League of Legends as a whole were brought down in power due to the strength of this comp, and rightfully so, as the power, playmaking potential, and complete and utter dominance of the meta really came together, and so in my eyes, these things led to this being the best team composition in League of Legends history.
Symptomatic fecal flaws due to twisting gut flips and bats and forth and it's time I know it takes a mighty dose of paper. Keep in mind we just skip the ship well far along the way. Divine